Do you find you can't get enough spooky goodness? Then by Jove, you need to check out the Generally Spooky Patreon. For the princely sum of £4 a month, you can enjoy our main episodes a whole day earlier than the general public. If that doesn't float your boat, you can become an £8 a month spooky trooper. You'll get the main episodes early and access to 12 extra Patreon exclusive episodes, with more to come. The episode that really tickles my pickle is about Private Wojtek, a brown bear that served in World War II. As a top draw £12 a month Spookmaster General, you'll be on Cloud 9 with access to our Wee Blether series. In it, my darling wife and I debrief episodes, play games, and chitter-chatter about our goings-on. You'll also become a member of the Spooky Book Club, where Eilidh is currently reading us Peter Pan, having just finished Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Simply marvellous. Did I mention you also get 10% off our quality merchandise if you join? You bet your bacon you do. So come join us. Get your peepers over to patreon.com/generally spooky and support your favourite rapscallions. Tally-ho!
Hi, Ghosty fam. Welcome to Season 4 of the Activity Continues podcast, where we chat about the TV show The Dead Files, as well as other fun stuff.
We talk about true crimes, dreams, TikTok, pets, sharks. We also talk about what TV shows that we're watching, any recommendations, and we've even been known to go off the rails a little bit.
This is true. In this season, we have a new team member. Our friend, also named Amy, is going to be joining us to keep us knuckleheads in line. She is our fact checker who will handle all the details when we talk about shit that we know nothing about.
Thanks. I am so excited to share all of my random facts with you all and not just yelling at these two beautiful souls. Like, did you know that rosé wine is made from red grapes and it gets a color from the skins? We also share our own ghosty or paranormal experiences.
That's right. And not only do we share ours, but we want to hear yours. So please send them to us and we might just feature your story on our show.
We can be found on all major podcast apps as well as video versions on YouTube and Spotify. So join us weekly where
the activity continues. We nailed it.
Sweet.
Episode 50.
Did you think we'd get here?
No.
Me neither.
I thought you'd have divorced me by now. Welcome back to the Generally Spooky podcast.
For our 50th main episode.
For our 50th episode.
Or I guess we're using it kind of loosely, because we're actually on episode...
I want to say 66, 67.
If you count the multiple parts and miniseries and stuff. But in terms of main season topics, this is number 50.
This is number 50, baby.
5 seasons, 10 topics.
Hell yeah. You are listening to the Generally Spooky podcast, where we deep dive into Scottish history.
And have a hell of a good time doing it.
Yeah, we do. Eilidh does the research, the scripting, the writing, the reading, the talking, and I sit here. That's what I do. It's pretty balanced. It's like 50-50.
Yeah.
I am the husbands everywhere. I am just sat here.
It's like that meme that's going around with the new Barbie movie. If we have the two pictures, and it's she's everything, he's just Ken. Because Barbie's everything.
And I'm just Kieran.
He's just Ken. I don't think that. I love you dearly.
Well, that's good. And if you don't want to hear my part, well, I don't know, you could skip every so often if you wanted.
We could have an Eilidh-only version. If you would rather just get to the point.
No.
Now available on Patreon. I would do that, but it would have to be like pretty, like a new quite expensive tier, because I wouldn't really want to do all of it again as it is. So I feel like I would have to charge a lot to do that.
That's fair. I actually thought you were just going to edit me out rather than you'd re-record it without me.
I see, that would make it more feasible. I imagined sort of re-scripting for one person and doing it again.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of work.
Wouldn't be the same without me.
It wouldn't.
That's what I tell myself.
I think the joy in all of this is sitting here and doing it with you.
Well, I mean, I have a good time, but that's because I don't have the pressure of the workload.
See, and you know that. And that's why it's okay.
So it's fine. However, if I wasn't here, we'd be talking about the story already.
True. Wasted 3 minutes.
I know. Should we play some music?
Yeah.
I think we should play some music.
What's funny when we record is we always leave a pause as if we're waiting for the music to play.
Oh, yeah.
But we don't have to pause. We don't pause for the full length that the music takes, but we do take a beat.
Yeah, we do take like a 4-second pause.
Letting the music play before we speak to each other again. Even like conversationally, not to be recorded, we just sit in silence for a few seconds.
What do we do?
As if we're letting you listen to the music and then we come back. This isn't radio.
We do that.
50 episodes, and this is the first time that this has come up.
Behind the microphone. Well, what do you have to share with us for our 50th episode?
This is going to be kind of mega. It's a topic I've kind of kicked down the road for when I felt more, I don't know, professional,
Confident?
equipped. I'm none of those things, but we're doing it anyway.
But now is the time.
Because it's our 50th main episode.
But your toe hurts, so you can't kick it anymore.
No, I can't. It's gotten too heavy. It's getting dented. I don't want to wreck it. So we're going to do it.
Now is the time.
Well, for once, we all know what we're talking about. Because if you're listening, you've seen the title or the thumbnail. I know what we're talking about because I've been slaving over it. And Kieran also knows what we're talking about because we've booked to go visit this place.
I'm in the group, you guys.
Kieran knows what we're talking about.
I'm part of it. I'm not one step behind. I'm so excited.
Would you like to share with everyone what we're talking about today?
Today, we are talking about Glasgow Castle. Oh, I fucked it.
You had one job. I thought this would be nice for the 50th.
Today, we are talking about Edinburgh Castle.
Edinburgh Castle. I feel like this is the big kahuna.
I think so. It is the most castliest of castles in Scotland.
It's synonymous with Scotland, I think. The image of Edinburgh Castle.
I think so. I think so.
And yeah, I've held it back for a really long time because I just didn't feel like I could do it.
Too big and scary. Couldn't look at it directly.
No, and I still don't really have the confidence, but we're pushing through.
It's the 50th episode.
Well, I guess we just dive in.
I feel like we're going to have a fair amount to get through. So
Yes.
it is a big, old, important castle.
This week's episode, we're kind of focusing on the early history of the castle. So I'll say up front that sometimes it gets a bit murky. It's not really clear. Records are patchy, so we'll get there. There's a little disclaimer ahead of time.
Okay.
If you haven't seen it before, Edinburgh Castle is basically in the middle of the city of Edinburgh, which is the capital of Scotland. And it's on a really big, massive rock. So it's elevated above the rest of the city. It's very grand, very beautiful to look at. Before we even get into the castle, the rock itself that Edinburgh Castle is sitting on, I think is super interesting.
Oh, yeah?
It's the plug of an extinct volcano.
I didn't know that.
So it's where lava, or I guess magma, becomes lava, spews out of the ground to make this big basalt tower rock.
That's pretty cool.
It is 130 metres or 430 feet above sea level.
Okay.
And it stands 80 metres, about 260 feet, above everything else around it.
Oh, it's quite imposing.
Yes. So that's how much taller it is than most of Edinburgh.
Do you know what would be really cool to see?
What?
A photoshopped image which removed Edinburgh, so you just see the rock. Because I can't really picture it without the town and the castle.
There's probably illustrations of that somewhere.
Yeah, I wonder what it looks like, because it'd be quite It'd be almost like a little Uluru just out there by itself.
Yeah, it's very stark against the landscape around it, and it's because it is the result of volcanic activity, so it's spewing out of one place and not others. It's not glacial. If you have something formed by a glacier, then it's affecting everything around it as a glacier moves. This is very different. The rock, known as Castle Rock, is very intimidating to look at. It's very craggy. It has that really dark grey colour. And scientists or do you want to guess? First question of the episode, Kieran. Scientists have a rough idea of how long ago Castle Rock was formed. Would you like to guess as to how many years ago Castle Rock was formed?
Well, I'm going to answer your question with a question.
That's bad practice.
Why is it called Castle Rock?
You were going to make this a very long episode. If you don't wind it in.
That's my job. I'm not very good with rock age.
I'm not either. Just I'm curious if you have a guess. You can play along at home.
600 million years.
Too many.
60 million years.
Too few.
360 million years.
350 million years ago.
That was all right. That was
Third
all right.
time lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, 350 million years ago.
Goddamn. So that's a very extinct volcano.
Yes.
Yeah, because I can never really... It's hard to imagine ages with rocks and dinosaurs and things like that.
Yeah, it's difficult to conceive of because the numbers are too big.
Because I started with is it like 6 million? I'm like, no, it's more than that. It's probably like 1 billion. Is anything 1 billion? Let's go halfway.
The physicist in you there. Yeah, 350 million years ago. So it's been there for a very long time. Long before humans were habiting the Earth. I think this might be the furthest back we've ever gone in a podcast. I'm not sure.
That's true. Because we've had some, Pictish things, which have been pretty old.
But that's far more recent.
Yeah, that's...
You're in the thousands.
That's thousands of years, as opposed to hundreds of millions. It's pretty old.
So yeah, very old. But you can look at Castle Rock and see why it lends itself pretty well to a settlement or some kind of fortification.
Yeah, defensively.
Yeah, because it's high up, it commands the view for miles around. And you might not know to look at it now, given the city around it, but the layout of the rock makes it really difficult to access from the bottom. Because you can really only get to the top. Obviously, it's different now because there's a city and you follow the Royal Mile and everything. But before Edinburgh was Edinburgh, you can only really get to the top of Castle Rock from the east side of it because it's more of a gentle slope compared to the sort of sheer crags you get on the other sides.
Well, because it's pretty much shaped like a ramp, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you're able to control that eastern slope, it's going to be very difficult for any potential invader to get in on any other side. So it's pretty defensible.
And having walked up to the castle on more than one occasion, you're knackered by the time you get there.
Yeah, it's 80 meters.
Yeah, it's quite an
what that was in feet. 260 feet. So yeah, it's steep.
It's quite a climb.
And even the makeup of the rock itself lends itself well to fortification because I said it's made of basalt, which is basically volcanic rock. It's the result of lava. Basalt is apparently made when faster flowing lava cools down really fast. So I think it's thinner than some other types of lava you get, so it moves more quickly. But basalt has lots of iron and magnesium in it, which makes it solid.
Yeah, that'll make it really tough, won't it?
Yeah, so you're not going to blast it apart because it's just full of iron.
Fair play. So,
it's better than sandstone.
Yeah. Yep. If you wanted anything for a foundation, that's what you want.
Yeah, exactly. So it was made to have a big old castle on it.
Well, then that suggests it was habited and settled on long before the castle.
Yes, which we're literally about to get into right now.
See, who would set these things up for you if I wasn't here? To ask these leading questions. You couldn't just say that information without those.
Couldn't do it without you, darling.
I'm about to edit myself out of this. I'm editing myself out of a job as we speak.
The very smart scientists who know what they're talking about a lot more than I do reckon that people have been living on Castle Rock since the Bronze Age and Iron Age.
Okay. That's cool.
Very cool. So long before the castle. The Bronze Age was from about 3,300 BC.
You answered my question before I could ask.
I've got it right here. And it ended around 1200 BC.
Okay.
And basically this age was when people started writing for the first time and using bronze to make tools and weapons. The Iron Age immediately followed the Bronze Age, so starting about 1200 BC until 550 BC. And iron and steel tools were replacing bronze ones. But what's interesting is the Iron Age means a different time for different countries.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because different peoples discovered and started using iron and steel at different times. So for the UK, generally, it's 1200 BC to 550 BC.
That's interesting. I was just thinking, because in 500 BC-ish, Lycurgus founded Sparta, and like the Spartan warriors were formed.
It's interesting seeing the parallels.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, that was funny, that's just after the Iron Age. And I was like, or was it?
Well, and I think the Iron Age was a different time in China.
Oh, yeah.
Because different peoples were developing at different rates. But for the purposes of this episode, that's where we are.
Yeah. Tangent. No, we don't need to talk about it right now. Genghis Khan. Sure, we can talk about it in the blether? Genghis Khan.
Oh, men and Genghis Khan. If these scientists who know a lot more than me are correct, Castle Rock might be the longest continuously occupied site in Scotland.
Wow.
But they can't say for sure. It's tricky to tell exactly when people were living there, because they're going on what they find on the rock that proves, oh, this is from this era, we can date it. It's tricky to do.
Well, it makes sense to me that would be the longest continuously settled, purely because it has the strongest rock.
Yeah, it's a good spot.
Yeah, and like super defensible and things, but other places might have worn away, or even if you're on like a cliffside or something, there could have just been a landslide to kind of wipe it out for a while.
Yeah, there's lots of reasons that you can't always tell if somewhere was lived in a long time ago. Only people who really know what they're looking for are able to find these places.
Yeah, that's true.
But they found evidence on Castle Rock that suggests at least the Iron Age, and some scientists differ on earlier than that.
Yeah, that's cool.
I did read into lots of research papers on this subject.
Yeah.
I couldn't really make heads or tails of it. It was above my skill set. But I did have a look, and there just seems to be some debate.
That's cool. Thought we should talk about, or briefly mention, that Arthur's seat is different. It's just also in Edinburgh.
Yes.
Because that's where the fairy coffins, our very first episode, talks about the fairy coffins in Edinburgh.
Yes.
And they were found on a cliffside, but it's not the same cliff that the castle's on.
Arthur's Seat is not the same as Castle Rock.
Yeah.
They are two different big hills. In the Iron Age, it seems like Castle Rock had a big hill fort on it that was controlled by a tribe called the Votadini.
Cool.
Votadini. Votadini. Obviously, I don't think they gave this name to themselves. It was like the later Romans who came into contact with them that gave them this name. Same as the Caledoni, that's in Roman records.
Oh,
they talk
yeah.
about the Caledoni who live in the north. And then they later term the northern peoples Picti,
Got you.
which is where the Picts comes from.
That's funny.
Because I'm not sure if the Votadini were record keeping.
Yep.
But they were one of the earliest tribes to live in Scotland that we know of. And archaeologists found the remains of roundhouses on Castle Rock when they were working and excavating the castle.
Cool.
And they said that these roundhouses had, quote, heather-strewn stone floors, hearths and drains, unquote.
That's cool. That's pretty, like, advanced, really,
Right?
isn't it? Yeah.
I think that's insane. But also the fact that they know that they had these things.
Well, that they can recognise that there was heather on the ground. That's insane. So cool.
So yeah, that's the proof they had that the Iron Age seemed to be when people were there. It also seems that the Votadini traded with the Romans who were further south. The Romans stayed mostly to the south of Hadrian's Wall,
I was just thinking that.
which is a subject for another time. But they did have outposts and some forts further north, because they were trying to extend their influence, but they weren't doing very well.
Yeah.
But archaeologists discovered some brooches and pottery when they were excavating that were of Roman design. So the only way the Votadini could have gotten them is either through trade or
plundering.
violent clashes, but I feel like the Romans were better equipped. So
Yes.
it seems more likely they were trading. They'd come to some sort of truce with each other. There also seems to be evidence that the Roman military were sniffing about Castle Rock a little bit.
Well, it's a prime defensible area.
They were trying to control the area, but if they did, it never really lasted. And this was all in all of the more in-depth papers I looked at that I don't really want to get into, so it's very confusing. But, you know, they were kind of friendly and not, and they were kind of bristling each other a little bit, is all we really need to know.
It kind of sums up the Romans, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, they were pushing it. They were fucking around and finding out. The site that would become Edinburgh Castle, so not just the rock, is mentioned in the E-Godonin. If I have that wrong, Rhiannon specifically, you can tell me how to pronounce it. And I probably should have asked you before the episode. But we'll move on. These were some really famous Welsh poems.
Oh.
That were written about a group of medieval warrior heroes. They were written in the 600 to 700s.
Cool.
But they were writing about events that had happened about 600 years prior. So
Got ya.
they're written down later, but they're about, the first years AD. It's a very professional way of saying that. But in the poems, they mention Dunedin.
Okay.
And this seems to be, or for a lot of people, they reckon that this was the site of Edinburgh Castle. There was some kind of castle or fort there. And in the poems, I think all the heroes gather there before heading out to battle.
That's so cool.
And it was this great gathering place where they all feasted and then went out to battle. But I think they all died. I think it's like a tragic story. But I'm not going to get too into it because they're very, very significant, important poems. So I don't want to fuck it up.
Fair play.
Because they deserve more airtime to explain them than this. So I'm not gonna get too in the weeds.
Yep. I would love to see what that fort looked like.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be so cool.
Very cool.
Because I imagine forts like that being quite spread out, but there's not that much room to spread out on top of
It's pretty big.
Castle Rock. I suppose there is, because I'm thinking of like the castle is obviously giant for a castle, but I imagine forts surrounding like whole towns kind of thing. But mind you, the car park is also pretty giant. Edinburgh Castle.
You could fit a town on Castle Rock, I reckon. Because the towns weren't as big then.
Well, see, this is what I mean. Why I'd love to see the rock without the town on it, because I can't really picture the whole thing.
Yeah, I thought that was very cool.
That is very cool.
It's mentioned in these poems. And these seem to be the first time that it's referenced as something close to what we would recognise as Edinburgh Castle. But it always happens in these episodes that we start out with something very different to what we end up with.
Yes.
It changes a lot over time. And obviously it's worth noting that these poems were passed down and shared a lot before they were written down. So there's a chance that the story changed with the telling.
Yes, absolutely.
Before they were committed to parchment. Throughout the 6th to 10th centuries, there was a lot of power struggle, change, flux all across Scotland. Lots of different tribes and peoples, all vying for power and influence in different areas. We can talk about it in another episode because it's worth its own. But there was lots of different groups of people. Britain didn't look the way it does today. So we've talked about the Picts before. They were cracking about. The Anglo-Saxons were further south. The Scandinavians kept appearing to try and claim territory and land. It wasn't until the 10th century, so the 900s, that the Kingdom of Alba was formed, which is closer to Scotland as we know it today.
Yeah.
But even then, still not quite the same.
Well, because like the Lord of the Isles was his own thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the Orkney and Shetland Isles were Norwegian.
And the border wasn't necessarily where it is today.
So it's tricky to talk about Edinburgh Castle in the scheme of this because it's not what we recognise. And it's not something we've covered here, so it's tricky to break the ground on it.
Yeah.
But basically, it was very different then and there was a lot of conflict. At one point in the 900s, Edinburgh Castle was besieged and actually became part of Northumbria.
Wow.
Which was its own kingdom, but was also part of England. But not England as we know it, because England came from the Angles.
Oh, yeah.
Northumbria was its own thing.
That's a long way from, like, where the current Scotland-England border is, all the way up to Edinburgh. It's
part of the reason it's been contested over time. It's why relations were sometimes tricky, which we're actually going to talk about later in this episode. And we talked about it in our King David episode.
Mm-hmm. Super interesting.
But yeah, it was besieged, so Edinburgh Castle was technically part of England. But that didn't mean the same thing then when it happened.
No, because it was part of England, but not England as we know it now.
Yeah, apologies if this is confusing. It's difficult to get across without getting into the minutiae of it.
Well, and you don't want to make a blanket statement.
No. I'm trying. Edinburgh rejoined Scotland in the mid-900s.
Mm.
It's just wild to think about it now. In the early 1000s, Arthurian legends were written that seemed to include Edinburgh Castle in them.
Okay, that's cool.
There are references in these legends about Edinburgh Castle, although I don't think it's named Edinburgh Castle, to dog-headed people and the Black Witch.
Dog-headed people?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's a bit strange.
Mm-hmm. And Arthur and his knights go in search of this Black Witch in the Valley of Grief and in the Highlands of Hell. Which, from what I can tell, is just referencing the north of the border.
Yep.
They obviously knew the place very well. Some very apt descriptions there, if you're used to the south of England.
Sounds like they made their way through Glencoe up to Inverness, really.
They needed the Black Witch's blood for something.
Naturally.
I couldn't really tell what, but I hope it was something important.
To gain more power, usually.
But yeah, the Edinburgh Castle was mentioned in the legends of King Arthur.
Well, that's pretty cool, isn't it? It shows how significant it's been for such a long time.
Yes, just for different people.
Mm-hmm.
But now, at the end of the 11th century, we're kind of in more familiar territory for things we've talked about and things that are easier to fact check and verify. In 1093, Queen Margaret died in Edinburgh Castle.
Okay.
According to an account written by John of Verdun, who was a historian, the best you could be, sort of in early Scotland.
Yeah.
And we know Queen Margaret. We talked about her just a couple of weeks ago. She was King David's mother.
Ah, yes.
And she was later made a saint.
So
she became Saint Margaret.
Yep.
She died in Edinburgh Castle in 1093.
Is she still there today?
We'll have to see. She's the one who died a couple of days after learning that her husband and sons had died in battle.
Oh, yeah. I remember now.
If John of Verdun's account is true and accurate and everything, then she died at the castle. But other accounts from the same time don't mention that there's a castle there.
Okay.
So it's sometimes debated whether she actually died there or not.
Yeah.
Because it's debated whether the castle existed yet.
Well, when you're an ancient historian, you're capturing the stories, really, aren't you?
Yeah.
So you might get a bit creative now and again with the story. Just in little details. It's still important because it's obviously excellent that we have these records and things.
Yeah. So if we believe John of Verdun that happened, there's a castle on the site in 1093, and after all the royal deaths of the king and queen and everyone, King David's uncle Donald besieged Edinburgh Castle to try and win the throne from his nephews.
Yes.
Which we talked about.
Yeah, I was just taking for granted that of course the castle was there, because it's King David. Where else would he be?
Well, by the time of King David, there was a castle there, it seems.
Oh, okay.
We can kind of tell for sure that by 1107 there was definitely an Edinburgh Castle, because records indicate that King Edgar died there, who was David's brother, and he was king before David.
Yes. And that would definitely get noted down correctly, like where the king died. That would be...
Yes, yeah, as time was moving on, it seems like it was really there. Yeah, Edinburgh Castle gets referenced around this time, but a lot of the accounts refer to it as Castle of the Maidens.
Of the Maidens?
Yes. And some stories claim that this name was given to the castle because the Picts used to keep virgins there. In a fort on Castle Rock.
Yeah.
Like royal virgins. Don't know about that one.
That seems a bit random. Seems a way to villainize them. Or...
I mean, depending on your point of view, if I was one of them, it might be kind of nice being in a big castle that just keeps the men away.
Well, that's true, eh?
Like, oh, thank God.
Might be preferred.
Thank God.
Don't have to deal with the men. Or less of them.
But it was really during the reign of King David that Edinburgh, the city, was rooted properly, and he had Edinburgh Castle built more the way we see it now.
Okay.
He had it built and he ruled from there. He really made it an important hub for all of Scotland. It was the first time it had really existed.
Well, that's a good point, because if it's Alba and there's more tribes around, there's not going to be a capital city so much, is there?
No, because it's a different system. David brought in the feudal system from England, which we talked a little bit about. If you're interested, you can listen to episode 8 of this current season. But he introduced that new way of organising people under himself as king. So he was changing a lot, and this was part of that. He needed a hub to rule from. This is the seat of power. And that's why he built it all.
Yeah. I'm here, everyone come to me.
It still looked a bit different during David's time. There was lots of wooden defences, which aren't there today, it's all stone. Some stone buildings, but not as many. And he had St. Margaret's Chapel built, which is the oldest surviving building in the castle today. You can still see the building.
That's cool. Yeah, it wouldn't really make much sense.
That fucking pen.
Let's pop that down there.
Pen in one hand, fidget cube in the other, can't sit still.
ADH, what?
ADH, I forget.
It wouldn't make much sense for the castle to start as a tower house, which it has on like various other episodes. Like Leith Hall was like the tower house, and then it got expanded on from there. You can't really imagine Edinburgh Castle starting out as someone's house.
Well, yeah, it was a lot smaller than today, obviously. Yeah. But it was still a very grand building. It was made to be a royal centre.
Well, it seems like it was always so much more than a house.
Yes, absolutely. It became a symbol very early on. A symbol of power. And yeah, he had St. Margaret's Chapel built, and he dedicated it to his mum.
Oh.
Which is sweet. And throughout his reign, David ruled from Edinburgh Castle and gathered his court and advisors there. We talked in episode 8 about how he established the borough of Canongate.
Oh, yep.
So Edinburgh was popping up around the castle because the castle was important.
Yeah, it would attract that, wouldn't it? The place where people want to be.
Yeah, because the king is there. And all the money is there. You want to curry favour.
Yeah, and then the trade would come. Which makes sense.
The domino effect.
Yeah. And then compare that to Glasgow. There's not...
Compare it to Glasgow.
There's not really that same, like, central defensive area.
No, it's a very different city.
Because Glasgow's got a bigger population now than Edinburgh does, I believe. It's like a bigger city, technically.
But I would imagine it attracts less tourists.
Yeah. And...
it never seems as old as Edinburgh.
No. And although now it's the biggest city, it definitely wouldn't have used to have been.
No, it's a funny thing. Malcolm IV took the throne after David died. And Malcolm was his grandson, because David's son had died before he did.
Yep.
And Malcolm also used Edinburgh Castle as a powerful hub. Now, he didn't have an easy reign. There was lots of external threats to Scotland during his time. Like his grandfather and his great-grandmother, Margaret, Malcolm was known for his religious zeal. So he was nicknamed Malcolm the Maiden.
Oh, that's funny. Why?
I think it was to do with, like, purity and faith. from what I could tell.
Yeah. So not the maiden, as in because it was the castle of the maidens.
No, I don't think so. I don't think it had anything to do with that.
Yeah. Malcolm the Maiden.
Mm-hmm. He never married. Constance of Penthevre.
You've had a lot of difficult words these past few episodes.
Penthevre. Constance was supposed to marry Malcolm, but she outright refused to do it.
Wow.
Because she had her eye on King Louis VII of France.
Oh.
Who, to her, was the better catch than a lowly Scottish king. So she was like, no, this guy is way better and has more power, so why would I marry you?
Oh, man, how does she have the choice? Her choice of kings to marry?
Yeah, she refused. She
Damn.
wouldn't do it. But Louis married someone else, so Constance didn't get what she was after.
Whoa.
But Malcolm didn't really get the chance to win the breakup either, because he died when he was only 24.
Oh, well, that's a shame.
He died very young.
Mm-hmm.
Historians and scientists and whatnot think that he had something called Paget's disease, which is, quote, a chronic disorder that typically results in enlarged and deformed bones.
Ooh.
Unquote. I looked into this. I wouldn't recommend you do. It looks very nasty and a really difficult thing to deal with.
It sounds painful.
So you'd have an even worse time with that in the 1100s, which is when Malcolm was about. Not nice.
Not good.
So yeah, it makes sense that he died as young as he did, if he did have something like Paget's disease.
Absolutely.
And he died in 1165.
At least his legacy lives on for everything that's made in Edinburgh.
I saw the glow in your eyes as it entered your head. You light up like a candle. It's truly a joy to witness. If we ever do any kind of live recording of the podcast, people are going to love it. They're going to see it coming and they're going to love it.
I have a good time. That sounds what's happening over here.
So after Malcolm came King William the Lion.
Who we've mentioned before.
Maybe.
Or is it someone else, the lion?
We might have mentioned King William the Lion. I'm not sure. Let's see. He was king of Edinburgh Castle and of Scotland after Malcolm, but he Icarused his way into getting captured by the English.
Oh, no.
Which is always the worst way for it to happen.
Yep.
So I'll tell you a little bit about William.
Mm-hmm.
He was the longest serving king or queen of Scotland before the Union of the Crowns in 1603.
Okay.
He was king for 48 years.
Holy shit. Almost a 50-year reign in the
1100s.
The 1100s.
Mm-hmm.
God damn.
By all accounts, he was kind of your stereotypical Scottish king. If I asked you to imagine your perfect Scottish king, William is probably who you would imagine.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to indulge me for a moment.
I can do that.
I would like you to describe to me, in your mind, the stereotypical ideal king of Scotland.
Okay. Big, burly, and ginger.
Okay.
So he can battle, throws a lot of feasts, gets into a lot of fights, both wars and more locally.
It's like you're describing like the traditional Thor from Norse mythology.
Yeah, well, I was about to say, like, really into hunting.
Because he's redheaded and large and always eating something,
Yeah,
fighting.
I have just described Thor, actually.
Highly recommend you read Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman, by the way, if you're interested. Fantastic book.
So, Thor, I could have summed that up faster.
You were figuring it out.
Yeah.
Malcolm had been quite frail and quite sickly because it seems like he had this condition.
Because he had giant bones.
Yeah.
Oh.
William was strong. He was really big, burly, very powerful, and he was a redhead.
Ah! Nailed it.
So, he really is, if you imagine, I'm not saying that's like the perfect type of person.
No.
But if you're thinking about a stereotypical Scottish king, that was William.
Yeah. Equally like the dad from Brave.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing.
With a voice like Billy Connolly.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, along with all of the physical attributes that were quite stereotypical, William was quite reckless, and he was quite bullheaded. So once he got fixed on something, he was doing it. And he would take risks.
Yep.
So one of the things that he kind of obsessed over was taking back territory in Northumbria.
Oh, yeah.
If you listen to our King David episode, you remember that David was Prince of Northumbria for a time.
Yes.
And he became King of Scotland after that. But the territory had returned to English control, I believe.
Interesting.
Because it's been a couple generations since King David.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And David sort of fell out with the English at one point. But William was fixated on taking back this territory that his great-grandfather, however many generations, had had. And this put him at odds with King Henry II, who was King of England at this time. Because he's trying to take back this territory that now belongs to England.
Yep.
With me?
Yep.
William was the one who made the first formal treaty between Scotland and France.
Oh.
Way back in 1168.
He begun the long history.
The Auld Alliance.
Yeah.
That's how long we've been pals.
I was going to say something in French, but I've got nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Maybe not the best idea.
Well, I was going to be like, cheers to you in France, but I don't know how to say that in French.
I mean, brave of you to try.
Yeah, I was like, oh, well, like, bonjour to the French listeners, or I don't know.
Don't have any anymore. Not after that. Bonjour.
What? Bonjour.
Yeah, he made the first treaty between Scotland and France. But Henry didn't like that. Because famously, England is between Scotland and France. So whenever Scotland and France have gotten along, it makes England a bit
nervy.
Yeah, a bit twitchy bumholy, you know. William joined Henry's sons in a rebellion against Henry.
Okay.
We've talked about this before, possibly. Basically hoping to gain territory if they won. But the rebellion didn't go well. In 1174, William fought... What's wrong with me? In 1174, William fought in the Battle of Alnwick. It's spelled Alnwick, but I think it's Alnwick.
Alnwick. Alnwick.
I think it's Alnwick.
It's got to be Alnwick.
He fought in the Battle of Alnwick against the English. Very bravely, I might add. Another stereotypical tick.
Yep, with his hammer.
He charged the English forces on his horse, apparently shouting, "Now we shall see which of us are good knights." Which I think is the ancient equivalent to, "Come on, I'll fucking have you."
Who wants some?
Come on then. And you know, he's not wrong. That would be the deciding factor.
Yeah.
Who lives wins.
Ooh, bold.
He charged at the enemy, but in the fog of battle, he came off his horse, or was unhorsed, and he was captured.
Oh, no.
So probably not the heroic clash that he had imagined.
No. I mean, we could pretend it was heroic at first.
Certainly started out that way.
There was him against 50 men. What choice did he have, you know?
William was taken prisoner and shipped to Newcastle. And then he was sent off to Normandy in France.
Oh, wow.
Cut off from his country, he's now in a very vulnerable position.
Yes.
Because he's still King of Scotland, but he's completely isolated.
Why Normandy, though? I thought he just signed a treaty with France.
Well, I don't know if Normandy was in French control.
Ah.
I'm a little iffy on those details.
I've just done exactly the same thing with Scotland not being the Scotland we know today. I'm then assuming France was the France we know today.
Yeah, I'm not sure where borders were at that point or who had what. I could be wrong on that though. It could be in France. Maybe they negotiated that he would be held there. Maybe. Just as long as he wasn't in Scotland, but I'm not sure. But he was held in Falaise, Falaise, in Normandy. King Henry II then made things even worse for William because Henry sent an army into Scotland.
Oh no.
In William's absence.
It's a good move.
Yeah, strategically clever.
Yep.
Henry moved his forces and then basically forced William's hand into an agreement
Okay.
where William had to agree that Henry was his overlord.
Ooh.
And that the Scottish Church would have to concede to what the Church in England wanted them to do.
Ah, it was a King Henry who began the Church of England, I think, wasn't it?
You're thinking Henry VIII.
Oh, okay. I'm 6 Henrys ahead.
Worse than that, though, part of this treaty, this agreement, had William paying for Henry's costs of his army going into Scotland.
Damn.
He charged him for what it cost to send his army into William's country.
Oh, if you've got all the cards, you know.
And I read this was 40,000 marks.
Oofed.
But I don't know what a mark would be today.
Who knows?
A lot of money.
Yeah.
To raise this money, William had to tax the Scottish people. He didn't just have this to hand.
Yep.
I'm not sure if that gives you any kind of gauge, but it wasn't a small amount of money.
No, but well, if it's enough to move a whole army, mobilise a whole army even.
So William signed the deal
What else could he do?
because he wanted to go home.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the Treaty of Falaise because that's where he was.
Yep.
And in 1175, William swore fealty to King Henry.
God damn. Ooh, how far into his reign was this?
Oh, there's a question. Malcolm died in 1165, so maybe about 10 years,
Okay.
if everything went smoothly.
Well, so it's somewhat paid off for him then, because he carries on being king for like 40 more years.
Well, he wasn't killed.
Yeah. He didn't die, and he didn't get dethroned, technically.
Technically, no.
Yeah.
But it caused an awful lot of problems in the hundreds of years that followed. And even in William's lifetime, it caused him problems because people started rebelling against him in Scotland.
Well, I was thinking his lords and things probably aren't very happy about this arrangement, are they?
Well, a lot of people felt like Scotland had been humiliated, and William had been humiliated by England and Henry.
Well, he
because
was.
he'd had to swear fealty to him.
Yeah.
He'd lost. So people were rebelling against him, saying, we don't want this treaty. You shouldn't have signed it. We can do things without you. You should have just not signed it. The treaty was ended in 1189, though. It was supposed to go on in perpetuity? Perpetuity.
In perpetuity.
That's a good word.
That is a good word.
I don't even have that written down. It ended in 1189 because King Richard of England, he was Richard the Lionheart.
Maybe
Is that who you were thinking of?
Maybe.
He needed money to go on crusade.
Oh.
He didn't have enough money to fund all his crusading that he wanted to do. So he ended the treaty in return for 10,000 marks from William.
Wow. The Crusades were then through England, weren't they? Through Europe.
Oh, that was into like Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. So lots of European countries were involved, but a lot of the conflict happened far further east.
Yeah, it was all like Europe and East. That makes sense. Because you get to the top of Scotland, you just fall into the sea, you know?
Sploosh. So that's the price of a kingdom. 10,000 marks.
10,000 marks. Well, at least they got paid both ways. Okay, we're going to buy this off you and you're going to pay us, and then we're going to sell this back to you and you're going to pay us again.
Sweet.
It's good business deals right there.
I should say all of this is happening while these kings that we've talked about so far, they're all living in Edinburgh Castle, which is why they're relevant.
Yep.
These are the ones who were controlling Edinburgh Castle, so they're part of the history.
Yeah, absolutely. Edinburgh was where all these decisions were coming out of.
Yeah. William died in 1214, and his son Alexander II became king.
Okay.
But the following century was a really turbulent one for Scotland, and Edinburgh Castle in particular.
But the past ones have been turbulent.
So it's only getting worse from here, boy.
Things are just always turbulent. That's the lesson.
Yeah.
They're never unprecedented times. It's all happened before.
Well, from this time, we're kind of in Wars of Independence territory.
Ooh.
In 1296, after a succession issue in Scotland, King Edward I took control. And we've talked about him before. You can listen to more on that in our Stone of Destiny episode, if you're interested in how all that came about. I won't get into it here. Partly because I'm planning a Wars of Independence series over the summer, you guys. But you didn't hear it from me.
Oh.
And that's like callback number 2 or 3 to another episode already, by the way.
Nailing it.
Edward took Edinburgh Castle in June 1296.
Oh, dang.
He took control of a lot of the Scottish castles. We talked about it in our Rocket Castle episode, because that was one of them, I think.
Got you.
He took Edinburgh Castle. Very bad man. And when he did, he took the Stone of Destiny, because the Stone of Destiny was being kept in Edinburgh Castle.
Oh. So he took it out to England for the first time.
In 1296. He also took the Scottish crown jewels at the same time that he took the Stone of Destiny. But these are different to later crown jewels.
Well, that makes sense.
Which I'll get to. I'm hoping in this episode, we'll see how we do for time, it may run over. At this time, what he took was a crown, a scepter, a ring, and a sword.
Damn.
He took them all. And these are important because they're like symbols of a nation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what the crown jewels aren't just the jewels, they're everything they represent.
Exactly, which is also why he took the Stone of Destiny. Because
Yeah.
it's Scotland's ability to crown their own king or queen has been taken away. But there was something worse that he took, which I didn't talk about in our Stone of Destiny episode, I don't think.
Oh.
And this is what I was talking to, or sort of hinting at to you in the car the other day.
Yes.
Yesterday?
You did mention there was a Stone of Destiny related something.
Well, when Edward took Edinburgh Castle and stole the Stone of Destiny and the crown jewels, he also took the entire National Archives of Scotland.
Oh. Now that's significant.
All of the important documents that were being kept in Edinburgh Castle, he took. And this is like Conqueror 101, because you're taking a country's records and its history.
Well, yeah.
So who's going to challenge him if he starts changing stuff? Because he has all the records. This is going to take us sort of further in our timeline. But the Treaty of Edinburgh-Northampton was signed in 1329, which brought about peace between Scotland and England.
For a bit.
One of the terms was that the National Archives had to be returned because they'd been taken.
Yeah.
They weren't.
What?
They were never returned. They were kept in London, where he had taken them.
That's wild.
And then they disappeared.
Oh, shit.
No one knew where they went.
Oh.
Until 1948.
Were they discovered?
They found them, but only 200 documents remained.
Oh, man.
So there's this huge blank space in Scottish history because so many of these important documents were lost.
Oh.
No one knows what happened to them. I have no idea how this came about, but they were never returned, and by the time they were discovered, they were basically decimated.
That just... Doesn't that just grind your gears and boil your blood?
So much lost.
What the fuck? Oh. That's so bad.
I did warn you.
You did warn me.
So it's why there's a lot of blank spaces in Scottish history pre-1296.
Yeah.
Because that's what a lot of these documents pertain to, because that's why they were there. And yet they're just gone.
Oh, so upsetting.
It just it really grinds my gears. I found out about that and I was just horrified.
Oh, brutal. Absolutely brutal.
Anyway, 1296. Edward has taken Edinburgh Castle and he keeps it for a whopping 18 years.
That's pretty good going. You have Scotland's seat of power for 18 years. Damn.
Until 1314.
She says with significance that I haven't recognised.
When Thomas Randolph led the charge to take it back.
Oh.
This is a fun story. I've decided to keep a sort of short version of this in this episode, even though it's a good Wars of Independence story. So forgive me if it does come up again in future series.
We can forgive you.
But no, I do it all the time. You shouldn't be surprised. Thomas Randolph was Robert the Bruce's nephew. I think we might have mentioned him before.
Name rings a bell.
I've always known him as one of his main supporters, but he kind of flip-flopped a little bit between Bruce and the English.
Oh, yeah?
He started out strong, because Robert the Bruce was his uncle. But then he was captured by the English, and he switched sides while he was held by them. Then he was taken home by the Scots. He was freed and switched back.
Well, okay.
But I read somewhere he took some convincing coming back around to Bruce's cause. So I don't know if he switched out of necessity and then was like, no, I'm not doing this again. I was down in England. They had me. I don't know.
Maybe he was down in England just being like, there's so much to eat and it's not dark all the time. This is really nice.
Yeah. What I'm saying, I don't know if it was a conversion of necessity or not.
Yeah.
But he flip-flopped.
That's interesting.
But he came back to Scotland, he came back around, and Robert the Bruce made him the first Earl of Murray.
Okay.
Maybe to sweeten the deal.
Yep.
A little bit. So he was the Earl of our area, Murray.
Cool.
After that, after he was made the Earl, it's confirmed that he supported his uncle fully, and he fought for him multiple times. But it was Randolph's attack on the English-held Edinburgh Castle that he became the most famous for.
I mean, that's got to be the most significant, isn't it?
Would you like to hear what happened?
Absolutely, I would.
I mentioned earlier that the geography, the layout of Castle Rock, made it difficult for anyone to take Edinburgh Castle if they were stuck on the outside of it. On a miserable night in March 1314, Randolph snuck up to the base of Castle Rock with about 30 men. And this was the group. They had decided they were going to take the castle back.
God damn.
What was their secret weapon, Kieran? They're standing at the bottom of Castle Rock. How were they going to do it? What did they have that meant they had a chance?
Now, I want it to be climbing hooks so they can scale the cliffside and sneak in. But I feel it was much more likely that they had English uniforms so they could walk in the front door.
Okay. Smart.
That's my 2. Definitely wasn't both at once, I think.
It would be strange to see English uniformed soldiers scaling Castle Rock when they could just walk in the front door.
So I feel it's more likely they had either like English uniforms or disguises in general.
Okay. Their secret weapon was William Francis.
I didn't know they had a William Francis.
Right, you would have said that immediately if you had known.
Yeah.
He might not sound like much, but William's father had previously been the governor of Edinburgh Castle, which was a very important position. He was basically in charge of all military personnel in the castle on behalf of the king or queen.
Wow.
So William Francis and his dad, they both knew every little bit of the castle, every in and out. So you can imagine that the man who's in charge of the castle's defences and the soldiers and everything, him and his son would know all of the castle's weaknesses because they have to defend them.
Yep.
Through his father, William Francis knew about a secret path up the cliff to the castle.
Oh.
From the town below.
Now that's cool.
There was a way to climb it, and he knew where it was.
Oh my god.
So William led Randolph and his men to the bottom of the secret path. And one version of the story says that William knew about this secret path because he would sneak out of the castle at night into Edinburgh to have rendezvous with his lover, which is very romantic.
Yep.
But other versions say they knew about this path because they had to defend the castle. So they're at the bottom, and Randolph, Francis, all the men, start scaling Castle Rock.
Very nice.
But they don't have equipment. They're just climbing.
Yep.
And it was a miserable night in March. Like raining. Everything's very slippy. They just have to keep climbing and hope that they don't fall.
Well, that sounds a bit terrifying. I wonder if the path is still there.
I don't know. I'm not sure exactly where it is. I'm kind of hoping we're getting to go to Edinburgh Castle in a few days. I'm kind of hoping to ask about it, see if they know.
That would be cool.
But I'm not sure if it's clear. I wonder if they wouldn't advertise it because what if people tried it?
Well, it'd be really dangerous.
Yeah. Because it was dangerous for them.
Yeah.
But this is desperation, and it was just that Edinburgh Castle was important enough that it was worth the risk.
And it seems likely that an 800-year-old path wouldn't be there anymore.
No. Well, I say a path. I think it's just a route they could climb.
Okay, yeah.
Not something they could walk up. Like, they had to climb.
Oh, okay, I did wonder. I was thinking like they could just walk up, like a track.
I don't think so. There might have been parts where they could do that, but it was a climb.
Got you.
As Randolph and his men reached the top of the rock, an attack separate to them started at the main gate of the castle.
Just coincidentally?
This had been planned
I was going to say.
Randolph.
Nice.
So that this was the diversion. So all of the English were drawn to the front gate at this attack that was happening on the castle. Randolph and his men snuck into the castle while everyone was distracted, so they could be the second prong.
Yeah.
They could come at it from within the castle, pincer all the English soldiers in. Success.
Bob's your uncle.
And they managed.
They did it.
Yeah, the English were so surprised because they hadn't expected any kind of attack to come from the other side.
Or from the inside of the castle. Why would you?
Mm-hmm. So the element of surprise won it for them, and they managed to take Edinburgh Castle back.
God damn. Good work. Well, and because I was thinking, like, how did they overpower like that many men? But if you have a castle, you probably don't necessarily need that many men to defend it.
Well, no, it wasn't the whole English army.
Yeah.
Because they were fighting in other places.
This
is in the middle of war. So there's enough men to hold it.
There'd be a garrison.
But not a whole army.
Mm-hmm. Wild.
So yeah, it actually worked. They climbed up Castle Rock, came in secret, and surprised the English and got the castle back.
Whoa, that is wild.
When the Scots had their beloved castle back in their possession, Robert the Bruce ordered them to burn the whole thing down.
Just the whole thing. He was quite ruthless that way, wasn't he?
Which made him a good leader in war.
Yeah.
It just wasn't worth the risk of having it fall into English hands again. They couldn't chance it, so they burned it down.
Crazy to me.
And they also filled in the Fore Well, which is still there. There's a well as part of the castle because it's very difficult to access drinking water.
Yep.
From the castle.
That would make sense.
So it's a really deep well, and this is the main drinking water source for everyone in the castle. We'll talk about it later, but this well was extremely significant in all of the sieges that happened after.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you're going to sit out a siege, you need drinking water. So they were thinking ahead. They filled in the well when they were there. The only part of the castle that wasn't completely destroyed was St. Margaret's Chapel.
Wow.
Robert the Bruce ordered for it to be spared because he was religious and he wanted to honour Margaret. So that's the only part that was spared, which is why you can still see it. But when we go, we'll see the building still has burn marks on it.
Really?
Yeah, it still has evidence of when the castle was burned down in 1314.
Wow.
That's 700 years ago.
That's wild.
Like some of the stonework is burnt and like reddened because it was scorched.
Oh, that's crazy.
Isn't it?
Well, because I was kind of wondering, like, how do you control the fire well enough?
You do to a point.
But they obviously managed somewhat.
How cool is that?
That's really cool. So we need water. We filled in the well. Oh, god damn it.
Shit. Why did we do things this way round? Why did we do that? 20 years pass. Robert the Bruce died.
Oh.
And war broke out with England again. In 1335, the English once again held Edinburgh Castle.
They've held it a lot more than I expected.
Especially during this time.
Yeah.
In 1341, another daring raid was planned to try and take the castle back. And our leaders this time were William Douglas, William Bulloch, and Walter Curry. Would you like to hear what they did to take the castle back from the English?
Did they do it again?
There's a couple different versions of the story. Bear with me, but they went with something a little bit different. William Bulloch rocked up to the front door of Edinburgh Castle on the 15th of April, 1341. He was in disguise and made out to the guard at the gate that he was an English merchant and he had wares to sell. And he was asking if the guard and the garrison in the castle would consider buying his stuff. Now, they've been holding the fort, but they've been like under siege, so everything's been locked down. Conditions aren't great. They're hungry, they're bored, all of that stuff. The guard at the gate says, abso-fucking-lutely, we'll buy your stuff. William said he had wine, he has nice food, all kinds of stuff. So the guard said, yeah, we'll definitely buy that from you. Bring it. We'll take it. William Bullock says, yeah, cool, no problem. I'll be back tomorrow. Sit tight. Don't worry about it. That's verbatim what he said. Well, the guard at the castle didn't know was first that William Bullock was a Scot.
Yep.
Second, William Bullock had landed at Leith with a ship that had about 200 Scots aboard, all in disguise, so nobody knew they were there. William Douglas and Walter Curry were with this force. So he has a lot of manpower behind him, and he's not really a merchant. The next day, William Bullock returns to the castle with all of the goodies that he had promised.
Absolutely.
He has lots of big barrels of wine and carts with food and all kinds of stuff, with lots of men carrying all of these supplies to the front gate. And all the men who are guarding the castle are super excited about this.
Hell yeah.
Lots of treats. They're bored as hell. They don't want to be here. So as soon as they see William with all the supplies, they let down the drawbridge to let them in, to get all the goodies. Once Bullock and a few of his men got underneath the portcullis gate. A portcullis is a big metal gate. It's a grid pattern and you can lift it and lower it. Once they got underneath the gate, not through it, they broke character. All of the barrels and carts, boxes, crates were dumped on the ground, and they started attacking the English guards, quickly followed by William Douglas and the about 100 men that he had brought with him, who were hiding out of sight of the guards.
Nice.
Around the gate. When the English tried to bring the gate down to stop the attack, the abandoned barrels and carts stopped the gate from hitting the ground.
Oh.
So they couldn't close it.
Hell yeah.
Which was the whole reason they had all of these goods in the first place. So they're trying to bring the gate down, it won't shut, they can't keep the Scots out. Some of the barrels were even thrown and rolled into the English soldiers who were running at them and was knocking them down.
Amazing.
Rolling over them as something out of Asterix and Obelix.
I know.
And the surprise attack worked again. Very quickly, the English were completely overwhelmed by this surprise attack, didn't see it coming, and the Scots took back Edinburgh Castle.
Wow. Well, if that guard who initially said yes wasn't killed, I bet he wishes he was.
I mean, it's pretty ingenious though.
It's good. I like it, especially coming with the wares.
Right? And I realise I'm focusing on the Scots taking back the castle, not the English taking the castle in the first place, but it's my podcast, so do what I want.
You guys can just lay off.
Yeah, I thought that was ingenious.
Love it. I love everything about it.
A couple months later, we're still in 1341, but a couple months after the Douglas raid, as it's known, David II was King of Scotland. And he was Robert the Bruce's son, but he had been in exile while Scotland was at war. He took on Edinburgh Castle once again, just like his father and family before him had done. And he had it rebuilt and brought back to its former glory. Because even when the English had it during this raid, it wasn't the place it was.
Okay, yeah.
Because it had been completely burned. But it was still strategically important, which is why they held it. But David II had a lot of it built up again. He had a huge, big new part of the castle built, which he called David's Tower.
Very nice.
And this became the new heart of the castle. This is where David lived. It was over 30 metres tall, so about 100 feet, and it took 9 years to finish.
9 years.
A big square tower. So kind of like a tower house, but inside the castle.
Is that the big square bit that you know today?
No,
Okay.
it's not. We will get to that eventually, but you can't see David's Tower anymore. We can only see the very bottom of it.
Cool.
It's basically just the foundation layer that's left.
That makes sense.
But it was very intimidating and imposing when it was built. David didn't get to enjoy David's Tower because he died before it was finished in 1371. It took a long time.
Yeah.
However, the royals continued living at Edinburgh Castle throughout the 1400s. It was once again an important hub, seat of power, yada yada. And this is when we get to all the Jameses.
Oh.
We're at that point of history.
We begin the James.
Yes, the Jacobean era. Eras. So many Jameses.
So many Jameses.
Some might say too many Jameses. Yes, so we've reached the period of all the Jameses living at Edinburgh Castle.
Had to happen one day.
Yes. What I did find interesting, I can't remember which James it was. I was looking through the guidebook for the castle. Oh no, that's a lie. I was looking through some documents I found online about the castle and life in the castle. And what's interesting is, I think it was later Jameses, the term royal household stopped being just applied to the building that all of the royal family and their servants and courtiers and advisors lived in. And it became something mobile. So later kings, later Jameses, moved from castle to castle and place to place. And that was what they did. They didn't stay in one place. So the royal household became the name for him, his family, and everyone who was travelling.
Oh, interesting.
But they were still referred to as places within a castle. So you'd have the royal wardrobe, and those would be the people in charge of like the way the monarch dressed and having them all fitted out. You'd have the kitchens, who would be the people doing all the cooking and supplying the food for this moving court. It was a very strange thing. And you had the king's chambers, which were his like close advisors, as if it's his bedroom, but it's not.
That's so interesting.
It became this idea rather than a physical place.
Well, because when I think of the Jameses and castles, I think of Stirling Castle, because we talked a lot in that episode about the various James I.
Yeah. They travelled around, and it was just expected they would go from place to place, rather than, like with David, however many hundreds of years before, who stayed fixed.
Yep.
Which I thought was interesting.
That is really interesting.
It's a very different concept.
Yeah. And it does make a lot more sense, because you have a whole country to rule, so you have to go and be in the whole country.
Yeah.
Most of it. I doubt he came up to, like, Wick very often. Interesting.
It's funny, isn't it? Completely different. In 1440, the infamous Black Dinner happened at Edinburgh Castle.
Oh, okay.
We have a whole episode about that if you're interested. But here's the bullet points. William Douglas, 6th Earl of Douglas, and his little brother were invited to Edinburgh Castle to have dinner with King James II. James was 10 and William was 16. According to the legend, a black bull's head was presented to the boys over dinner, and then the Douglas boys were dragged away screaming as James wailed for them. The Douglas boys were executed, and most people think it was all coordinated by their uncle who wanted their power.
Such a brutal episode.
Yeah. There's a whole episode on it if you want to know more, but it seems likely that this all happened in David's Tower in Edinburgh Castle.
I wonder how David feels about that.
Probably not great.
Probably not great.
Probably not great.
I can't imagine anyone feels great about what went on there.
No, no one comes out of that looking good.
Even the uncle who got all the power, he can't feel good.
Maybe you just didn't look directly at it.
Yeah.
Willfully convincing yourself that you're in the right.
Not good.
No, not good. Throughout the 1400s, Edinburgh Castle was really beefed up as Scotland's arsenal.
Okay.
Rather than just somewhere for the monarch to live. Lots of weapons were kept there, held there, but they were also forged and made there.
Oh, cool.
I think at one point it was Scotland's most important or Scotland's biggest foundry. So lots happening there. And it explains why lots of the buildings and the roofs of Edinburgh Castle were built to be bomb-proof.
Okay.
because there was lots of gunpowder sitting about. So they had to
Oh.
be.
So it's not necessarily coming from the outside.
No. But obviously there was still like a bit of residence for the king to live that was very grand. But this was also happening at the castle because it was easy to defend. So all of the weapons aren't going to be taken.
Well, if you're being sieged, you want the weapons coming from inside, not from outside.
And you don't want attackers to be able to steal your weapons.
Right enough.
So
Okay, well, there's good sense in that.
not necessarily what you would think of when it comes to Edinburgh Castle.
No, I always think of what happens inside castles being meetings and markets. That's what goes on inside the walls. I definitely don't think of forging and smiths.
But yeah, a lot was happening there. That's where it was done, and that's where it was all kept.
Very cool.
In 1457, the most famous of all Edinburgh Castle's weapons arrived.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't made at the castle. It was actually delivered all the way from Belgium.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a gift to King James II, who we just talked about, from the Duke of Burgundy, because James had just married his daughter, Mary of Gelders.
Okay.
This was a very fitting gift for James II because he was obsessed with weaponry and artillery.
Okay.
He was hugely enthusiastic about all of it.
Such a boy.
This weapon was Mons Meg.
Is that a cannon?
It is a cannon.
Oh, is it a big cannon?
She's described as one of the greatest medieval cannons ever made.
Wow.
And she's known as a she rather than an it.
Mm-hmm.
Mons Meg.
Mons Meg.
For 1457, Mons Meg represented the height of technological advancement. A truly modern weapon of war. She was a freaking massive cannon. Huge. A single cannonball for Mons Meg weighs 175 kilos. That's 386 pounds.
Oh my days.
That's one cannonball.
That's more than twice what I weigh.
Mons Meg was built to fire these cannonballs 2 miles,
Holy shit.
or 3.2 kilometres.
How on earth do you aim?
I mean, you don't really.
Well, if you're
You
two
do a
miles,
bit, but
if you're 2 miles away, you'll miss the castle you're aiming at.
2 miles for a 175 kilo cannonball.
God damn.
That's
Well,
terrifying.
That's obviously badass, but how do you use it?
I mean, people were very skilled in using cannons.
But
They were effective because if you were sieging or besieging somewhere, it's the only way you could get through castle wall.
I guess so, because if that's how heavy the cannonball is, how heavy is the cannon? But then they got it over from Belgium, so
Slowly.
yep,
Very slowly.
it didn't sink the boat it was presumably on.
No, I imagine it was a very big boat.
Because if it got rolled through England, it would get stolen, presumably.
The diameter of Mons Meg's barrel is 20 inches.
20 inches.
That's 510 millimetres.
That's hefty. Yeah, so how do you pick up these cannonballs to fit them in the cannon?
With lots of men.
I know. Oh, it's wild.
There's a photo, a more modern photo, of a child lying inside the barrel.
Wow.
That's how big it is. You can fit like a small person inside the barrel of this cannon.
So does this cannon still exist?
Yes, still exists. It was damaged later in life, which I'll get to, which is why it didn't stay in use. But there's a legend about how Mons Meg was made, which it isn't true. But would you like to hear it anyway?
I would love to hear it anyway. Sounds very Norse mythology.
Oh, not even. It's just a made-up story. King James II was besieging the Earl of Douglas at Thrieve Castle down in Dumfries because James and the Douglases weren't getting along. A local blacksmith approached King James and presented him with this immense cannon with the best wishes or blessings of Clan MacLellan. The cannon was lined up at its target, Thrieve Castle, and was lit for the very first time, releasing one of those absolutely insane cannonballs.
Yes.
The cannonball burst clean through the castle walls and apparently hit Margaret, Countess of Douglas, and took her hand completely off.
Oh no. We had another death by cannonball, and it's just always brutal.
Not confirmed that she died. It just took her hand off.
Oh.
To give you some context of who we're talking about, Margaret's brother had already been killed by James II. He was the William Douglas who was thrown out of a window at Stirling Castle.
Into the Douglas Garden.
Yes.
Yep.
This was her brother. So this is why they're not getting on.
Well, I mean, that makes sense. Do you think she tried to catch it? That's why her hand got blown off, like a ball.
I mean, I hope not, because you'd feel so stupid.
Just like baseball reflexes came and she was like, oh, I got this.
Honestly, with how fast that thing would come at you, I don't think you could do anything.
No.
I don't think you'd have time to try and catch it.
Oh.
So the cannonball took off Margaret's hand, James won the siege, and the cannon was named after the blacksmith and his wife, in honour of what they had done and what they had all achieved.
Yay.
But this story seems like nonsense.
Yeah.
Because it seems unlikely, from what scientists and historians have said, there's no way a small-time sort of local blacksmith could have made Mons Meg.
No, I was wondering how on earth you could make it.
In like such a small town, because it's immense. This thing is huge. And there's lots of records, and I'm fairly certain Mons Meg was brought over from Belgium, from a town called Mons, which is why she's called Mons Meg.
Well, that makes sense, doesn't it?
So, I don't think it's true. But I want to tell you the fun story anyway.
I like that. Shout out to The Meg, the movie with Jason Statham about giant shark.
We do watch that all the time.
Top tier.
That's our guilty pleasure. We're exhausted.
Let's put The Meg on.
Just want to watch something to make me feel something.
The Meg 2's out this year.
Jason Statham is half naked and in the water for a good chunk of the movie, and I have to say I enjoy it. I'm only a woman. What would be the best kingly gift for you, Kieran? Because James II got his massive cannon. He was obsessed with artillery.
Uh-huh.
What would do it for you?
Ooh. At the time?
At the time or now.
Or now? I feel like I would really appreciate like a really magnificent table as a king.
Oh, yeah.
With like a really like exotic wood or something. Like some really fine craftsmanship of something made of wood. I think
Nice.
that's kind of first thing that comes to mind. Or if it was like now, just for me in my life, one of Steve Vai's guitars.
Oh, yeah. Fair.
That would be it.
That doesn't surprise me.
Because that would cost a kingly amount. You'd have to buy it from like a Hard Rock Cafe or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or something. Because, I have one of his like brand of guitars, but I have one like he played.
A guitar he like, designed.
Yeah.
Rather than played.
Oh, I could have the big like Teeth of the Hydra 3-headed guitar.
He got so excited there.
I know. This guy sussed it. But like the one he has, I don't know if you can buy them, like a production of it, but I want his one. What about you?
Well, I think my James II era gift as a queen would be a really grand library.
Ooh, nice.
That would be mine.
You could sit at my table to read.
That'd be fun. I could play your Hydra guitar. Oh yeah, I think a grand library. But my modern version is sort of kind of silly because it would be a secondhand bookshop.
Yep.
I would want to be bought the like building of a secondhand bookshop that I could run as queen.
What was it? Eilidh, you're queen? You don't really have time to run a bookshop?
I can do what I want. But if I could choose, like, if I had a big castle with big grounds, then having really beautiful and full gardens would please me.
Yeah, that would be smart.
That's where I would go.
Nice. I like it.
Because that's all I really want. I want to run a second-hand bookshop and I want a pretty garden. Mm-hmm. So if I could do it on a queen scale, apparently I'd only go marginally bigger.
It's good to know what you want.
Please. Okay, back to it. To give you an idea of how scary Mons Meg was, in 1489, James IV So James II was the one who received Mons Meg. James IV came after.
Mm-hmm.
He still had Mons Meg, and he used it to force a surrender from his enemies, just from the sight of her.
Wow.
He went to battle with Mons Meg. They saw that he had taken this cannon, and they surrendered before having to deal with it.
Oh, from the way you described it, don't blame them at all.
And in 1497, she was such like an icon that she was all tarted up in colourful fabric and serenaded by musicians as she was very, very slowly rolled into Northumberland.
Wow.
To besiege Norham Castle. And it didn't work. The siege was a failure. And she was just wheeled back to Edinburgh at the very slow speed of 9 miles a day.
To be fair, that's almost more than I expected.
15 kilometres.
Yeah, goddamn. Mm-hmm. I mean, it'd be hard enough. We just talked about how steep the hill is up to Edinburgh Castle. How hard is it to get up the hill? How hard is it to get it down the hill without it crushing everybody?
Mm-hmm. It is a big piece of machinery.
Oh, it's like Grom in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, honestly, looking at it, it's very intimidating.
The big flaming battering ram that sieges Gondor.
So I'm excited to see it in person.
I know.
Because it's still at the castle. You can go see it.
Monstrous. Did that start the tradition of Edinburgh Castle firing its cannon every day?
No, but we are going to talk about that.
Okay.
James II didn't really get to play with his new toy for very long. He died 3 years after receiving it. He died in 1460 because he was killed by an exploding cannon.
Oh no!
Not Mons Meg, a different one, but he was exploded at Roxburgh Castle when he was trying to siege it.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Which we have an extra episode all about over on Patreon if you want to know more about that. So he wasn't killed by Mons Meg, but that's still quite spooky that he was killed by a cannon. It misfired, the whole thing exploded and took him with it.
God damn. That's crazy. If Mons Meg had done that, I think Edinburgh Castle wouldn't exist.
It's so big.
If they'd fired it out of the castle, it might have taken down the whole of Castle Rock. I'm so curious how they built it.
That I can't speak to. I know it's like cast in metal, but I really don't know enough about it. Well, they were making cannons at Edinburgh Castle. That was one of the things they were making.
That's cool.
Just not this ginormous one.
Do you think he went, "Cannon, you hear me now?" and then lit it?
Maybe that's why he's dead. The cannon itself was so offended, it just went, nope.
The camera went, ugh. And then
Can't be here for this.
Maybe. I mean, if I was that cannon, I'd be like, oh my god, that's so funny and witty, you guys.
That's what Cannon would say, is it?
Yeah, that's what Cannon would say if I heard King James say that joke.
Do you remember talking about Alexander Stewart in our Lochmaben vampire episode?
I vaguely remember it.
Vaguely remember. He was James III's brother.
Okay.
Who really wanted to be king himself and felt like he would do a better job. He was the one who led the raid at Lochmaben Fair that ended really badly.
Oh, yes.
This is Alexander. In 1479, Alexander was held prisoner in Edinburgh Castle for treason, and he managed to escape, apparently by getting the guards absolutely pissed and then climbing out a window using a rope, like something out of a cartoon.
Wow. I mean, I suppose at one point that was an original idea.
Has to come from somewhere.
Has to have started once.
But he did that, it worked, and he escaped Edinburgh Castle.
Good effort.
And then in 1482, when Alexander tried to rebel against his brother again, it was James III who was held prisoner in Edinburgh Castle.
Wow.
Because Alexander ruled for a little while with like, some of the nobles who supported him. He fucked it all up. The nobles didn't support him anymore and he had to hoof it.
Yep.
We're going to talk a little bit more later about the castle as a prison. So keep a pin in it. But for now, all you need to know, if you weren't an ex-king and you were being held prisoner in the castle, it was not a good time.
Just a bit rough. Okay.
In the late 1400s, King James III had the Crown Square built. And it's It's kind of in the style of an Italian piazza. So it's a big square and it has lots of buildings around it. Mm-hmm. But it's inside the castle.
Yeah. That's how I imagine castles and forts to be kind of built and styled.
Well, it's that way because he was drawing inspiration from Europe.
That's interesting.
That's how European castles were being built. So he decided he wanted to do that too. Because it's all about status.
Yeah.
So you go with what makes you look cultured and sophisticated.
Absolutely.
So that's why Crown Square was built. And eventually all the important castle buildings would be arranged around it. Mm-hmm. So places like the later Royal Palace and the Great Hall, they would be built in the early 1500s around this square.
Very cool.
So we're going from purely fortification to having the one main hub building. Mm-hmm. It's expanding and it's becoming more about status and culture.
Interesting.
And placing yourself as a monarch among the group of European monarchs.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're now in the reign of James IV. Into the 1500s. Mm-hmm. And in my research about the castle, I came across a really interesting character that I had never heard anything about before.
Doesn't happen very often.
Who we're going to talk about next time.
Oh. You and your damn hooks.
I know. I apologise.
Well, it's exciting because when we return next week, we will have been to Edinburgh Castle.
Yes, so I may have some things to add to this first episode, which we can talk about at the beginning of next episode.
Yep, it just worked out in such a way that we couldn't quite get there before we recorded.
Yeah.
But I'm excited.
Do forgive us, but we will still bring you everything that we find.
Please forgive us. We're sorry. We're trying our best over here. Or alias, I'm just sat here.
But that's the earliest history of Edinburgh Castle. We're going to move on next week.
Super interesting. I thoroughly enjoyed hearing about the pre-history.
Yeah. It's not something we delve into very often.
No,
I think because I don't have a lot of confidence in talking about it.
Fair. I liked it.
We will be back next week with more Edinburgh Castle.
Yes, we will.
Just for you.
Just for you guys. All the Edinburgh Castle and Jameses you could deal with. I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
All the Jameses you can stomach.
Yeah, it's not very many.
No. We do have a very special announcement to come at the very end of our Edinburgh Castle series.
Yeah, we do.
So make sure you're tuned in for that. Because it's going to be a good one.
It's exciting.
Now we're going to head over to our wee blether over on Patreon.
Yes, we are. I have notes to debrief. If you enjoyed this, consider rating us on your podcast player. Mm-hmm. Follow us on Instagram and consider joining the Patreon because there's a lot of cool stuff happening over there.
We post there like 2 or 3 times a week. Mm-hmm. So it's a good place to be.
Yeah,
and it's a great way to support what we do because it's the only way we make money from the podcast. So it'd be great.
Yeah, it would.
Bye. Bye.